Hello, and welcome to Research Methods. I'm delighted that you're joining us on this video, and I'm very much looking forward to our semester together where we talk about research methods. In this video, we're going to outline where we're going to be going for the rest of the semester. And before we get too far into it, I thought I'd just like to make sure that in class, when we're having our in-class conversation, we are absolutely certain that everybody has a copy of the syllabus. The syllabus is very important for this course, as it is for any other course. The syllabus gives us some information about where we're going to be at any given point in the semester. It's a roadmap. It helps us stay right on track. So we want to make sure that you have access to the syllabus at all times. We also want to make sure that you have access to a handout that I will make available to you, and this handout is on tips for printing PowerPoint lecture notes. In each of our videos, I'll be going slide by slide through a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared in advance and made available to you in advance. And we want to make sure that you have a printout of this so that you can be taking notes as you're going on through. So this is an important aspect of the course. We'll make sure that you've got that going on in our first day of class, and then hopefully for all subsequent sessions, when you're preparing by looking at the video outside of class, you'll be able to make notes right on top of the PowerPoint. We do this for an important reason. Learning involves much more than the sensory motor task of seeing some information and copying it down. We want to make sure that you're thinking about it, and occasionally we'll have a fairly complicated image up here that we'd like you to add information to without having to worry about getting down all of the details in the image. We'll hand you the image by way of the PowerPoint file, and you can add the relevant information as we go along. This way you're doing more than just the sensory motor task of seeing and copying. Very important for making the most out of this. And we'll come back to that a couple of times in this presentation. Okay, so at the beginning of every one of our sessions, I will start out with an outline that will tell you what we're going to be discussing in the video, and then what we might be rehearsing inside of the classroom for the corresponding classroom session. So in today's session, we'll be talking a little bit about you and what we might expect of you in this course. This Research Methods course presumes that you've taken some kind of introductory psychology. Most of you will have taken that here at Denison. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about me and what you can expect from me. And then we'll do a little bit of checking on our technology. We will not need the technology very much in our first session, and we won't need it for the first couple of sessions. But as we get into the course, you will see that this is really a mixture of a research methods course and an introductory psychological statistics course. We've woven the two of them together so that you can see how a design corresponds to its particular statistic and how statistics correspond to the research design more generally. So we're going to be going back and forth. We will not need the technology on the very first day, but we'll check out the technology, and if there are any problems, we'll identify those to the information technology folks, so that when we do come up to that technology component, we'll be ready to go. And then we'll dive in and we'll ask about some motivational issues. We'll ask about why take a course in research methods. Whether you're a psychology major or not, we want to properly motivate the session. And then finally, we'll look at some themes that are going to be characteristic of our course. And you will see this throughout you will see various aspects of these themes throughout various portions of our entire semester together. So looking forward to all of this, why don't we jump right in and talk a little bit about you and what we can expect of you inside of this course. So I like to, in a tongue-in-cheek manner, joke a little bit about what is expected of you, but I do mean these things seriously. I'm going to use a facetious biblical reference in doing my recommendations to you. First and foremost, read thy syllabus. I've already mentioned once that the syllabus is our roadmap, and we will have lots of assignments to supplement what we do here in video, to supplement the rehearsals that we have in class. We like to have very interactive classroom sessions, and I'll be relying on you to hold up your share of the airtime on those. But we have lots of information floating around, and we need to get things done by particular times, and the syllabus will help you to plan and to get the most out of our session. So please read the syllabus. The dates on the syllabus with regard to exams and quizzes and assignments will be firm. We will only alter those in a case of a relatively extreme emergency. In the years that I've been teaching this course, I think I've never had to alter an exam date or a quiz date or an assignment date. By contrast, the readings that you will see in the syllabus where we have particular page numbers on particular days, we generally abide by those. However, sometimes because the nature of our discussion is such that we will spend a little bit more time on one topic than on the next, we want to have a little bit of breathing room so that we're not so constrained by the syllabus that we can't move by just a little bit. So there might be a little bit of flexibility on the readings, but we're going to use the various exams and quizzes as relatively major road markers on this roadmap through our course. We also want you to read the Blackboard. The Blackboard is the electronic file sharing device that we're going to be using for this course. Some other folks might be using a different kind of file sharing system at other colleges perhaps. We use Blackboard for the moment, but there are other kinds that might be used in future versions of this course. In case you need to know the URL, it's shown here and it's shown on your printout. Also on your computers throughout the college, you probably have a way of marking this using bookmarks on your web browser. You might be able to have favorites or bookmarks of some certain varieties so that you can regularly get to Blackboard. Blackboard, or whatever our file sharing mechanism might be in the course, for us it will be Blackboard this particular semester, will be important because this is the way that you will access not only all of the PowerPoint lecture notes, but also the announcements for the course, and also the videos, like the video that you're watching now. I will post all of the lecture notes in advance and all the videos in advance. So we want you to take advantage of the file sharing that Blackboard offers to you. As an option, and I've alluded to this already, I would strongly encourage you to print the lecture notes in advance of watching the video, so that as I'm going through the video with you, you can figure out for yourselves what was particularly interesting. You can figure out what might have been less clear and what needs greater clarification. You can make a note of that on your notes and then bring that into the classroom. I would recommend that a great way of saving some paper while also leaving an appropriate amount of room for you to make your notes is to try to put maybe 3 different slides on any given side of the paper. And there's a handout that we'll have in class that will show you how to click around inside of PowerPoint's printing menus so that you can put multiple slides per page. Some people like to do 6, some people like to do 2. I think for most students 3 slides per page works best. It's a great way of saving some paper and also leaving enough room for you to see what's going on inside of the slide and making some notes for yourself. Watch thy video lectures. I've done video lectures in a course before, and students report that this is a fantastic way to get a hold of the information before they come into the classroom. And also, in a few weeks, when our first test comes up and throughout the course, when various exams come up, you have a permanent record of me giving a oral presentation of the information to you. And this verbal presentation is typically something that students find to be the most intuitive way of learning the material, although it's nicely supplemented and importantly supplemented by the work in the book, in the textbook that we'll be reading. And that brings me to this admonition, this commandment, so to speak. Read thy book. The book is Research Methods in Psychology by Shaughnessy, Zechmeister, and Zechmeister. And we think that it's very important for you to read each of the assignments before coming to class. It will deepen your understanding of the material. And we'll say more about that in just a little bit. In our classroom, we will have access to lots of computers on which we will perform the statistics that we need to be successful when we're doing our research methods in psychology. And it's going to be very tempting when you've got this beautiful computer in front of you to engage in some social media, maybe the Facebooks and the Twittering and the texting and emailing and so forth. It'll be very tempting to do that. I'll ask you please to refrain from doing that. I know it's tempting, and I know it seems like nobody else is listening, but we can hear you typing. The people around you can see the information moving on your screen. It is enormously distracting to the other students if you're surfing in any way. Even if you're only surfing with a mouse, we can still see that that's going on, and we ask you to be respectful to your neighbor, not create that distraction. Please avoid the temptation to type or surf during class. Okay, now what's expected of you more precisely? I have 6 items listed here. We'll go through them one at a time. I recognize that it might be the case that you can't read all of these when I have some smaller print up on the projection screen. And this is why it's critical for you to have the PowerPoint lecture notes printed out in front of you. But I will read them to you and elaborate on each one as we go through. So please read before coming to class. This might be the single most important thing that you can do. Maybe as well as watching the video, but if you prepare well for class, we'll have a very effective rehearsal and you'll really set the stage for mastering the material well. We'll ask you to actively participate in class discussions. One of the strengths of being at a smaller college in a real live classroom is that you can interact with your peers, you can interact with the professor in a way that you probably couldn't do in some kind of Google Hangout or other kind of technology that would allow for a virtual interaction, and those are helpful, but there's nothing quite like being able to be in the room with a person and point and to be able to move around the room and participate very actively in the discussions that we're having on the topics that we'll be studying. So I will ask you to actively participate in our class discussions. Importantly, we'll ask you to hand in all assignments on time. I'm a bit of a stickler, just fair warning, for timeliness, and I do that really to help you in the long run. What you will find is that in almost any profession that you enter, timeliness is going to be very, very important. Your client, whoever your client will greatly value timeliness, and your client will mark you down rather ruthlessly for not being timely. So we want to acquire the habit of timeliness early in our careers. If you're going into science, I'm a practicing scientist, and I sometimes am writing grants to organizations like the National Science Foundation or the National Institutes of Health. And these organizations have very strict timelines for when things must be submitted. They have their own internal clock, and if something is submitted even 1 second late, that entire proposal might be disqualified and not accepted at all. It might have been a great proposal, but if it's 1 second late, it won't be accepted. Everybody has to play by those same rules. So we're going to try to develop that habit early on in our semester, early on in your careers, and we'll try to get you to appreciate the value of being timely. So please hand in all assignments on time. Our syllabus will indicate to you what the penalties are for various kinds of latenesses. I won't go over those now. I encourage you to read the syllabus. Be considerate of others. And this is a little bit related to the timeliness issue. When you are not on time for every class and you're walking in late, it might not feel like it to you, but it's actually creating a tremendous distraction to everyone else. So out of respect for everyone else in the class, we ask you that you be timely and that you be considerate of others in other ways as well. Sometimes in a research methods class, we'll be talking about ethical issues. Ethics is an important component of psychological research methods. And when we do talk about ethics, you will see that people have sometimes views that are very different from your own. And that's good. It's good that we have different viewpoints. It's good that we can talk about those in a civil manner. So we will ask for your civility, for your consideration, for you to keep an open mind and try to be considerate of points of view that might be different from the ones that you yourself entertain. So we're all the way down here now, and we're talking about seeking help if you need it. I would strongly encourage you to be in contact with me if you ever find that you're having some difficulty with the material. We can do that by having you set up an appointment. I'm here on campus really quite frequently and I'm quite available, but I might not be available at any given moment, so I would discourage you from just stopping by at random, but strongly encourage you to make an appointment. I really am willing to come in early in the morning or late at night at various times of day to help meet with you so that you feel comfortable with the information. It's important to me that you feel comfortable with the information, and I hope too that you enjoy the information. I will also have an office hour, as you'll see on the syllabus. You can take a look at that and see what my office hour is, and I will be there faithfully at that time. In case you would like to stop by without making an appointment during my office hour, I'd be delighted to see you then. Finally, you can contact me electronically. My syllabus contains the email address that you can reach me at, and I would encourage you to email me as questions are coming up. I do have just a word to say about that, and that is that I have a colleague who entertains questions by email as I do, but she does something that I don't do. And what she does is she says to her students that she puts a quote-unquote moratorium on email questions or any other kind of question 24 hours before every exam. And the reason that she does that is she wants the students to be practicing the information each day well before the exam starts. Sometimes people are in the habit of letting things go to the last minute, and you can imagine having a classroom full of students who have let things go to the last minute, and now people have various kinds of questions, and everybody wants, quote, just a few minutes of the professor's time just before the exam is starting, or in the hours before the exam is starting. I would discourage you from getting into that scenario. Please try to prepare well in advance as we're going through the course, formulate your questions, and try to make appointments with me or email me along the way, I will be much less successful in responding to you immediately before an exam because I'll probably be deluged with other questions. So a little bit of planning goes a long way. Seek help if you need it. I'm delighted to help you. I wonder if I can spend now a little bit of time talking to you about my background and what you might expect from me. So my own background started with the graduation from college in 1993. I studied in New Jersey at an institution called Fairleigh Dickinson University. I'm a native New Jerseyan, and in 1993 I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. Immediately after I graduated, I went off to Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where I studied experimental psychology, first earning my Master's of Science in Experimental Psychology in 1995, 2 years after graduating from my undergraduate institution. And then 2 years after getting my master's, I earned my PhD, again at Brown University in experimental psychology in 1997. Immediately after that, I went on to do something that some of you may have heard of. It's called a postdoctoral research fellowship. And this is a little bit akin to doing something like an internship or a residency if you're a medical doctor. In the world of PhDs, we sometimes will do postdoctoral fellowships. I did mine at the Center for Neurobiology and Behavior at Columbia University in New York City, and I spent 4 years in that capacity, from 1997 to 2001. And then in 2001, I started at Denison University, joining the Department of Psychology as a faculty member. So that's a little bit of background about my professional experience. Now, what I'd like to share with you is some ideas about what you can expect of me in our course together. First, you can expect that I will hold you to high standards. I know that you're very smart, and I know that you're capable of a lot, and I will be pushing you just a little bit, gently but consistently, to try to reach your highest academic accomplishment. And I'm sure that you're going to be able to accomplish great things in this course. I have a lot of confidence in your ability, and we will get there together. So you can expect that I will hold you to high standards. You can also expect that I'll try to ensure some kind of fairness in airtime in grading and punctuality. We do have the rules about grading and punctuality spelled out in the syllabus. I encourage you to read those so that there are no surprises as we go along the way. This issue about airtime is also an important one. For us to learn effectively in our small group environment, I will be calling on people on a regular basis to be sharing information, and I'm hoping that we'll have a lot of student-to-student communication in our course during a regular session. And it might be the case that a few folks, through their own enthusiasm, are taking a little bit more than their share of the airtime. So I might have to say a few times during the semester, if you can just hang on to that idea, we'd like to hear from more voices. We'd like to hear from a broader variety of folks. You shouldn't take offense to that. I'm just trying to split the airtime as evenly as possible. You can also expect that I'll encourage your active participation. I'll try to do that already by having you look at the video and having you prepare some ideas before you come into any given session. I find that students are actually quite willing to talk, and they're not so shy about talking if they've thought about the material and if they have something to say. If they're not so well prepared on the material, sometimes our students don't know how to form a question. So the motivation for doing videos like this and for encouraging you to do the readings as well is that you'll be better able to actively participate in any given session. You can count on me to lead and focus our discussions and our activities, but I'd like for our sessions to be largely student-driven. We're trying to flip the classroom these days by having you watch the lecture outside of class, as you're doing right now, and then moving into a very interactive classroom where you're working student-to-student and student-faculty on a daily basis. I will make my lecture notes available to you in our file sharing mechanisms. In our case, we'll be using Blackboard and something called the S drive that some of you might be familiar with. So that information will be available on a regular basis to you. In fact, we plan to have all this information up and available through these file sharing mechanisms even on the first day of class. You can look many days or many weeks into the session, and you can see what the lecture notes might be like for that session and also what the video might be like for that session. And then you can count on me to reliably meet with you during office hours and appointments and so forth. We've already talked about the importance of making appointments. Please do so. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll come back in just a second and we'll talk about checking out our technology. Welcome back. We're going to be talking about checking out our technology, and this is something that we're going to do in our first session just to make sure that things are in place. And if they're not in place, that's okay, because we won't need the technology immediately, but we will get the folks in information technology working on this so that when we do need the technology in sessions to come, it's sitting there waiting for us, ready to go. So during class, what we're going to do is we're going to establish first that everybody can log in to the Novell server. So we'll have you do that in class. If you're doing that right now while you're watching this video, you might want to open up a screen and see if you can log in. Okay? We'll see if your Novell sign-in is working. We're going to be relying heavily on a particular software package, especially in a couple of weeks, and increasingly so as we move throughout the semester, and we begin to weave the research methods with the statistics. We're going to be using some software called SPSS, and that's the software package for the social sciences. It might be misnamed in a way because not all the people who use SPSS are social scientists. Some psychologists see themselves as social scientists. Other psychologists see themselves as natural scientists, like maybe the biologists would or the chemists would and so forth, but SPSS works for all of us. So we're going to be using SPSS quite extensively in this course, and you might want to click on the SPSS icon on your monitor just to make sure it opens up. If it doesn't open up, we can chat about that in class, and we'll see if we can get some help from information technology. After we're done checking out SPSS, we can minimize that and see if we can go into our browser and open up Blackboard. That'll be our file sharing mechanism. We can use either Internet Explorer or Netscape or Chrome, Google Chrome. Any of these would be fine for us. We want to make sure that you can get into Blackboard. This is how you're going to be accessing the announcements, the PowerPoint lecture notes, the videos, and items that we might have throughout the semester. Okay, the address for our Blackboard page is going to be shown here. You probably already have it as a clickable item somewhere on your menu, but it is https://courses.denison.edu, and you might find some bookmarks or favorites lying around your screen that will get you there expediently. Okay. If you get to Blackboard, you can log in and you can see the announcements. There'll be a welcoming message from me to you in Blackboard just to make sure that everybody is connecting to it. Okay. You'll also see that there's a page there for the syllabus. As we've said several times already, the syllabus is something that we'd like you to read all the way through on the first, before our next session. And in case there is a change to the syllabus for whatever reason, I will always post the most recent version of the syllabus to Blackboard, so there's never any confusion about where we're going to be on a particular day. It will all be laid out there and available to you 24/7 on Blackboard. Okay. All right, if you'd also go to the course documents section of the Blackboard page, you will see some sample lecture notes, a sample version of each of our lectures. We have the PowerPoint notes available for you there. We also have available for you there the videos that will be strewn throughout the course, typically one video per day. There might be a few sessions where we don't have a video, but generally there's one per day as a rule of thumb. Okay? And finally, we can log out of Blackboard and close that browser, and then we'll take a look at the S drive. This is one other file sharing mechanism that we will have for placing information like some of the practice exercises that we can post either to Blackboard or to the S drive. When we get to taking exams, we're going to need to have you do some computer work and save your electronic computer work into one of the files that's going to be available with your name on it on the S drive. So that's still going to be a couple of weeks away, but we want to make sure that you can access the S drive even during the first day of class, and if there's any trouble with that, we'll get IT working on that one. Using your handout entitled Tips for Printing PowerPoint Notes, we might have you navigate to the point where you actually could print some of the PowerPoint lecture notes just to make sure that you're comfortable doing that before we get too much further into the course. Okay? All right, so you can get your PowerPoint lecture notes either from Blackboard or from the S drive. All right, and we'll do our very last item in our technology check, and that is we'll have you open up Excel. Some students are very comfortable in Excel. They've used Excel in other classes. They might have used Excel in high school. For other students, they've never seen Excel, and they don't know what it's like. It's a spreadsheet that we will become very familiar with as the course goes on. In fairness to all students in the class, I will not presume that you've worked at all with Excel. I will be happy to treat us all as if we are beginners. If you know something more about Excel than absolutely nothing, then you're ahead of the game. So I make no presupposition that you've had Excel previously, but I think you'll find that it's a very powerful calculator. In some research methods courses, the professors have their students buy a calculator. Sometimes it's pricey. What we're going to do is use Excel as our calculator, and the reason that we do that is Excel is enormously flexible, it's very powerful, and perhaps most importantly, it's very available. Whether you go to work at a non-profit organization or a for-profit organization, a governmental institution, whatever it might be, there's a really good chance that the computers at your place of business, or your laptops or so forth, and maybe increasingly even your handheld devices and tablets, will have some kind of Excel software on them. So it would be really advantageous, given the availability of Excel software, if you become proficient in doing your computations using Excel. It also saves us from having to lug around a separate calculator, and we don't need to create a demand for all those atoms and all that material inside of a calculator. Excel will do the trick for us. Between Excel and SPSS, we'll have all the software that we need. Okay, so if you're unable to log on to Novell, you should go to the IT help desk in Fellows Hall or contact me, and we'll see if we can put you in touch with them and make sure that you're ready to go with the technology. And you can contact me about any other questions that we have regarding technology. So we'll come back in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about our motivation for the course. Why take a course in research methods? Welcome back. Here we will talk about our motivation for the course. And the question that we're going to address is, why take a course in research methods? So one of the ways that I like to think about the motivation for the course is by positing this question that students typically respond to quite well. The question is a simple one. Raise your hand, and I'll encourage you to raise your hand even if you're only watching the video. Raise your hand and keep it up if you have ever considered becoming a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, or a therapist, or a counselor, or a social worker. Hands up if you've ever thought about doing that. Okay, and keep those hands up while we ask the next question, which is, of those of you who have your hands up, how many of you would like to be a good one? You'd like to be a good psychologist, psychiatrist, therapist, counselor, or social worker? Well, what makes the difference between a good social worker and a not so good social worker is in part research methods, their capacity to understand the research that underlies our field of psychology. This is very important for excelling in any one of these facets of psychology, or also if you want to go off to become a research psychologist like me, or an academic psychologist like me. Research methods will be critical. There are other benefits too that you'll see, even if you're not going into any one of these fields, why a research methods course will be beneficial to you. Right? And what I'd like you to think about now, we'll try to make this as interactive as we can. We'll think about your reasons for taking this course. For some of you, it might be that this course is a requirement. And that's a pretty uninteresting reason for taking the course. I'm interested in your deeper thoughts about why you might take a course on research methods. And so we'll do this little class exercise. We'll ask about what research topics interest you. You might think back to Intro to Psychology, which is a prerequisite for this course, and think about what you learned with respect to, for example, developmental psychology, what you learned with respect to social psychology, what you learned with respect to cognitive psychology or biological psychology, or learning theory, or sensation and perception. Whatever the case might be, whatever your subfield of interest might be, think about your interests and how to relate those interests to a course on research methods. And we'll give you a few minutes to do this and write down 3 research topics that might be of interest to you. Okay? You can take a moment doing that. In fact, you can pause the video, and we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, welcome back. In class, what I'll do is I'll go around the room and ask you to share some of your ideas. I'll record those responses, and then I'll try to bring those out as much as possible during the course so we can try to make very specific connections to your particular research interests and some of the more abstract and general concepts that we're going to be learning. And I think you'll see that those two come together really very, very well. Regardless of what your motivation might be for taking a course in research methods, What we can say about this is that whether you're going into psychology or not, this course in research methods will greatly enhance your critical reasoning. And this is maybe the central idea of a liberal arts education. We want you to become a superb critical reasoner. And this course will help you do that no matter what you do later on in your life, in your career or in your careers plural. Increasingly, people are having multiple careers across their working lifespan. Research methods will help you in all of those cases. And it will help you in two big ways. First, critical reasoning, and those skills that are critical reasoning skills that you will develop in this research methods course will be important whenever you're producing new information. Sometimes you'll produce new information in different kinds of jobs. Certainly if you go off to grad school in psychology and lots of other kinds of grad school, you'll be producing brand new information. And people who produce new information well will be relying very regularly on the research method skills that we're going to be developing in this course and the critical thinking that we're going to be developing in this course. So it's all about how we produce new information and what kind of epistemology, what kinds of ways of thinking do we have when we're producing that new information. Additionally, we can say that the critical reasoning that you're going to develop here will be important whenever you're consuming information. Okay? And you're consuming new information all the time, no matter what your job might be. You might be a student, you might be a consumer of information as a responsible citizen, as a person who's about to make a large purchase for yourself or for a family member or for the organization that you're working with. We are always consuming information, and we can become more critical consumers of information when we've had research methods under our belt. So great critical reasoning will be one of the chief benefits of a course like this. What I'd like to do now is spend a few moments going through some themes for our course. Throughout our time together, we're going to come back to the upcoming 13 themes time and time again. So I'll list them one at a time, I'll announce them, I'll say a little bit about each without saying too much, and then we'll see how we come back to this. Okay, so our themes are going to be 13-fold, and we're going to be distributing those 13 themes as we look at this research cycle. Okay, so we're going to do the research cycle first by way of this diagram, and then we'll start to list each of the 13 different themes separately. But what we want to do now is understand this research cycle, and we will come back to this time and time again. I almost certainly will ask you to reproduce this on a test. Okay? And so first let's see if we can understand what's going on here. We're going to begin by talking about some aspect of psychology that pertains to the real world. And I'll take a step back just to remind you about something that you probably discussed in Intro to Psychology, and that is that every scientific field defines its scope. And the scope of investigation, the scope of things that we might investigate in the real world as psychologists, would be behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Other branches of science look at other kinds of phenomena. They might look at biologic phenomena, chemical phenomena, geologic phenomena, astronomical phenomena, whatever the case might be. In psychology, we're looking at the behaviors, thoughts, and feelings of varied organisms. It might be an individual animal, it might be an individual human, it might be a group of animals or a group of humans, but we're always looking at thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We might be looking at some aspect of cognition, problem solving, or language, or memory. We might be looking at how people develop socially, how people develop emotionally across their lifespan. We might be looking at sensory processes, visual processes and auditory processes and so forth. We might be looking at social interactions. We might be looking at anxiety disorders. Whatever the psychological phenomena might be, that's going to be represented here in this box. Okay? What we have after that is some kind of research representation. Okay? The real world is going to be a little bit too big for us to wrap our hands around metaphorically. We're going to need to create something that's a little bit more manageable for our research methods, and we're going to use some abstraction to get us from the real world to our research representation. You can think of the representation as a correspondence between what's going on in our study and what's going on in the real world. What I'd like to do is jot down two things on the board that I hope you'll jot down with me as we're working through this translation from the real world to the research representation, two manners in which we will engage in abstraction. Okay? So to get from the real world to the research representation, we will begin by offering operational definitions on any given study. And I'll jot that down here, and that is definitions. I apologize that this might be too small for you to see on the video, but I think if we spend a moment writing these down together, you'll stay with me. And when we talk about operational definitions, this is the process of literally stating the operations or the procedures that we use to measure a construct. We'll take a couple of simple examples. We might say that the real-world phenomena that we're interested in investigating might be something like intelligence. If we're going to create a research representation, or some kind of correspondence between our study and intelligence in the real world, we need to operationally define that. So we might state the operations for defining intelligence as something like intelligence as measured by an IQ test. You might not like IQ tests. Maybe you have some other measure. But whatever your measurement might be, we state the operations for measurement. Maybe you're interested in personality, and we might define personality as something like consistent individual differences. We might go further and say that personality is consistent individual differences as indexed by the 5-factor model of personality. Okay? We might have some index of depression for those of you who might have an interest in clinical psychology. And we might say that we're going to look at real-world depression, and we're going to look at depression as indexed by or as measured by one's score on the Beck Depression Inventory. Okay? So there are lots of different ways of operationally defining a real-world phenomena in behaviors, thoughts, and feelings so that we can come up with some kind of a representation. Okay? Another important thing to think about is that in the real-world phenomena that we're looking at, behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, we've defined our scope of psychology. It's the science of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. What gives our field methodological coherence is that we always engage in the scientific method. And in videos to come, we're going to spend lots of time talking about the scientific method. So psychologists are not the only people who look at behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. Artists do that. Writers do that. People who are very involved in religion have a lot to say about behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. But none of those folks engage in this in a scientific way. And that's okay. It's good that we have multiple ways of approaching the same kind of behavioral problems or problems relating to thoughts and feelings and so forth, but we are now having a scientific investigation as psychologists of these phenomena. We begin with operational definitions. The second idea that I'd like to add here for abstraction is simply, in one word, sampling. So if you'll jot down with me, sampling, we'd really like to know about everybody in the real world who, for example, is suffering from depression. Or we want to know about everybody who is on the autistic spectrum disorder. Or maybe we want to know about a large group of people that we would call the population. Maybe it's the population of all musicians or the population of all athletes. What we typically have to do, though, is create some kind of representation that is manageable. We can't measure everybody in a practical sense. The good news is we actually don't have to measure everybody. We can measure a representative sample of the real world and draw a lot of important information about the real world through sampling. Sampling is a bit tricky, and we're going to spend a couple of sessions on different varieties of sampling in the sessions to come. This will be a couple of weeks away from now. But this is giving you some idea now about how we abstract from the real world a research representation by, for example, engaging in operational definitions and in sampling. I'll put up 3 more issues that connect this box to this box. We now need some methodology to get us from our research representation to some kind of results. And there are lots of ways of thinking about this. I'd like to offer you 3, and these will take the form of just short phrases in each case. The first kind of methodology that we're going to use is observation. Again, I apologize for the small print, but this is the space that I have to work with. That's the word observation. And we're going to learn a lot about different kinds of observational techniques. Observation actually is pervasive across the sciences. It's not just psychologists that engage in observation. Psychologists are scientists, and other kinds of psychologists, like biologists, including Charles Darwin, was very masterful at observation. Astronomers are particularly good at making their kinds of observations. We're going to learn all kinds of observational techniques as psychologists. Another variety, another category of technique, we'll be looking at survey methods. Interesting about survey methods, surveys seem like they're really easy to do. I'd put it this way. It's very easy to do surveys surveys poorly. It's fairly difficult to do surveys well, and we'll see some of the details as we get into our survey methods portion of the class. Our final very major topic and category within methodology is going to be experiments. We're going to be talking about different varieties of experiments. We'll be talking about research designs that are almost experimental. We call those quasi-experimental. And we'll be contrasting the experiments with the quasi-experiments. We'll contrast those with purely observational methods. And we'll see that sometimes a survey method might have relatively lots in common with experiments, other times more so with observation. But these give you some idea about the kinds of methodologies that will generate some results, some research results, that we will then analyze. And in our session today, I won't list the many different kinds of data analytic techniques that we're going to use. Many of them we'll have throughout this course as we begin to merge our interest in research methods with our interest in statistics in this course. All of this will result in some kind of conclusion that we hope generalizes back to the real world, and our capacity to generalize back to the real world accurately will depend in part on how well we operationalize things at the beginning, how well we engaged in sampling, and how effective we were in our observational survey methods and experiments. Okay, so lots to do this semester. This is what we'll come back to time and time again, this research cycle. Please begin to memorize this. We'll see it a lot in future sessions. Okay, so based on, oops, let me pull this down now. Okay, based on your research interests, what I'd like you to do for our next session is identify a study that you would like to conduct and answer the following questions. These are good questions to have in mind before you start any study. But what is your research question? So what is the general topic within the broad realm of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings that you would like to investigate? If it helps you, you might remind yourself of some of the different sections of Intro to Psych. There's sensation and perception, there's biological psychology, there's clinical psychology, abnormal psychology, developmental psychology, there is personality psychology, and what else do we have? Cognitive psychology, learning theory. There are lots of different ways to go with this. So what is a research question that you would like to investigate? Who will the participants be in your study? Will they be human or not human? If they are in either of those camps, which ones will you sample from? Maybe you have multiple samples, humans and non-humans, in your sample. How are the variables operationally defined? How will you state the operations very precisely for how you're going to measure whatever it is you'd like to measure about behaviors, thoughts, and feelings? You might describe in general how you will obtain your data, how you will analyze the data, and I recognize that you might not recall all the techniques that you had learned in Intro to Psych, but do the best you can with that. Here I think is a very important question that is often overlooked, and that is before you get too far into conducting your study, you want to have a really good idea of for whom your findings will be important. So you might think about this as the question of audience. Who's going to be the audience for your work? Who's going to be the consumer of your work? Is it going to be the National Institutes of Health? Is it going to be other academic psychologists? Will it be your peers? Might it be classroom teachers who are trying to figure out how to teach their third graders more effectively? Will it be principals who are trying to learn how to become more effective administrators? Will it be pet owners who are trying to learn how to train their dog to do either a new trick or how to behave, how to engage in more pro-social behavior? Now, who's going to be the audience for your research? Okay? So think about those, and I look forward to taking those questions in class. Okay, now as promised, we're thinking about this big research cycle, and as